the Florida Panthers are Stanley Cup champions.
Oh, so close, but alas, it was not enough.
Scottie Barnes has signed his rookie max extension. It's a big deal in these parts.
Expectations for new Cavs head coach Kenny Atkinson.
The Tennessee Volunteers are national champions.
Chris Finch gets a contract extension.
The Locked On Podcast Network presents The Big 6 in 60. The 6 biggest national sports stories from the local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Get the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 60 minutes. The Big 6 in 60 starts now with the biggest story in sports.
I'm Peter Bukowski. The Big 6 in 60 is brought to you by Game Time. Last minute tickets, the lowest price guaranteed. Use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first ticket purchase. Today, we get the local insights from the top stories in sports, including an exciting game to finish the College World Series and some offseason hirings and signings in the NBA. But we start with the biggest story of the day. The Florida Panthers won the franchise's first Stanley Cup Monday night in a Game 7 they hope they never have to play. Florida picked itself up after stumbling through 3 straight losses to the Edmonton Oilers and took a 2-1 win in the season-deciding battle. The Panthers hoisted the cup in front of the home crowd and avoided a historic 3-0 disaster. Locked On Panthers host Armando Velez brought in Francisco Oporta to recap the biggest night in Florida Panthers history.
My friend, we just witnessed history.
It's almost like you can't believe it. I've been a fan of hockey since my brother-in-law introduced me to the game. He's a Pittsburgh Penguins fan. And I remember they took me to a Florida Panthers game. It was the Panthers versus the Carolina Hurricanes back in 2009. And I instantly fell in love with the game. It was 2009, 2010 season. I think around November. I think that's when they played them. And I've been a massive fan ever since. And kind of parlayed that into a bit of carving out my own little niche in the media through Litterbox Cats and meeting amazing group of people that I've associated with the Florida Panthers. There's a whole ecosystem of people that are involved with this team. Speaking of, a team that's, man, they did it the hardest way that they could, huh? It was the epitome of this franchise in a way. A blazing glory of a beginning, a really awful and dark middle, and now we are in the midst of the greatest era of Florida Panthers history. Right at the end, the Stanley Cup final epitomized the franchise, and I'm very happy for everyone that's been along this journey with me and everyone associated with the team since 1993. A lot of people have come and gone. And I think it means the world to everyone because this team and this fan base and anyone associated with it has gone through hell just to legitimize themselves. And now this cup is the ultimate stamp of approval from the hockey gods. It's going to be etched in silver, in sterling. So they can't take that away.
No. And validation for the market too. And after moving out of Miami in the late 90s to Sunrise, Florida, and everything in between, the 12-year playoff drought, the multiple ownership changes, the different names of the arena, National Car Rental Center, Office Depot, Bank Atlantic, BB&T, FLA Live Arena, to this, to everything with this one. And you think the Panthers doing it the hard way. And comeback cats. We spoke about it, how even 2 years ago with the Panthers and their run and gun style offense, and just not having any hope after winning the President's Trophy and getting swept. How did the Panthers recover from that, and then making that franchise changing move and bringing Matthew Tkachuk? It's crazy to think that 2 100-point players were being swapped out, and the last time that happened was Jimmy Carson and Wayne Gretzky in the late 80s, and the Panthers defeat the team that Wayne Gretzky played for too. So crazy to think how it all comes full circle for the Panthers, and to think that the Panthers got out early and with the lead. They were the first to score too. That tip in from Carter Verhaeghe, which he was off of power play 1 back to power play 2, and even though it was a few seconds after the power play expired, power play 2 was the one who technically did it again. It won't say on the score sheet that they got on that they added that power play percentage, but think about how they overcame Sam Reinhart on a counter attack too, to make it to a 2-1 lead. And also Dmitry Kulikov, after leaving for a little bit for him, made a great play with the net slightly open, and
biggest save of the game.
His save percentage was 1,000 there, and coming back for him being after a first round pick in 2009, bring it up the ice, and then the Panthers, they got to stick to their style of game. Paul Maurice spoke about how after the second period they were playing the right way, and also remember, I remember just thinking, this isn't the time to lash out on your team. This is the time to stick together and still hype the guys up and say, we got this, guys. You can do it. And encouraging, because the Panthers never had a sense of panic too. That's the craziest thing about that. And that's what happens when you have a guy who's been coaching since 1995 in the NHL level. I was 2 when Paul Maurice made his head coaching debut. So to give you guys an idea of that. And now with all the experience, all the regular season losses, Paul Maurice coming here and that franchise-changing move in Matthew Tkachuk, all solidified for this Stanley Cup. And crazy to think the late game situations for the Panthers. On the penalty kill, Gustav Forsling breaks his stick, and Stenlund has to give his stick where Gustav Forsling is a left-handed shot while Stenlund is a right-handed shot. And also the guys getting together. Eetu Luostarinen came to play. Brandon Montour and Gustav Forsling made probably the best play of the game when McDavid was pushing over and over and over again, and they still found a way with their structure. Amazing, Francisco.
I think the biggest difference that we saw from today in comparison to the nightmare that was games 4, 5, and 6. It was a nightmare. I think every single person that affiliated with the Panthers in any sort of way, that was truly a nightmare of a period that we went through. Everybody went through every single emotion that you could imagine. And Panthers score. Then Janmark scores on a breakaway. But then, unlike the other games, it didn't result in panic from the Panthers. And once the first period ended and it was 1-1, it was the best period of hockey the Panthers had played since Game 3. Mm-hmm. And you felt as the second period started, that what we were watching was Florida Panthers hockey again, that way we've been used to since the beginning of the postseason in 2023. And it instilled a confidence, I think, in myself personally watching the game, that they somehow refigured out what they were doing and how they got here. Just thinking about every challenge, the team that had always the little brother franchise, right, with the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Mm-hmm.
Boston Bruins trying to get revenge and failing. And then the New York Rangers, who everyone propped up as the true favorite in the Eastern Conference, and the Panthers take down a goaltender that was carrying that team in that series in the Eastern Conference Final. And then finally, the last gasp, and I'm hearing some people yelling and screaming outside here in Hialeah, by the way.
Love it. Love it.
I'm hearing dogs howling, and so there is some love for the Cats in Hialeah. So the city of progress is progressing in that sense. But then the last gasp, these haymakers thrown by the Edmonton Oilers and Connor McDavid trying to solidify his legacy. It's not your turn yet, man. So we're sorry. Sorry to everyone. Okay, the LeBron James of the NHL. All right, this is your 2007 loss to the San Antonio Spurs, okay? We'll see you in like 5 or 6 years. You can win like 1,000 Stanley Cups after this. We're getting this one.
We need a Tim Duncan. We need a Tim Duncan moment where he's shaking his hand after in the locker room and saying, "This will be your league soon."
And I mean, the ultimate insult to injury, giving him the Conn Smythe Trophy. I mean, my goodness gracious.
Who cares?
That's why no other sport does that.
Yeah,
giving the MVP trophy to the opposing player that lost, because like you can't even interview the guy.
Yeah.
here's your consolation prize, and you might as well just throw it in the dumpster.
First skater since Reggie Leach in the 70s to win the Conn Smythe, first player overall since Jean-Sébastien Giguère in 2003 with Anaheim Ducks. And the Panthers, 69-0-4 since last January.
Nice.
With having a lead after the second period. Panthers,
the nicest team of all time.
Yes, the nicest team of all time. And also, 31 years after the expansion draft in 1993,
yeah,
the Panthers also win the Stanley Cup 31 years after. So it was like being born, and then exactly 31 years later, the Florida Panthers became complete.
Stay up to date on all things Panthers by subscribing to Locked On Panthers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Up next, while the Panthers celebrate, the Oilers head home just short of history. The Stanley Cup will stay out of Canada for a 32nd consecutive year, and we'll find out why Edmonton couldn't complete the comeback in just a moment. I love sports. I love them so much, I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games. And the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up a bet anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. Garrett Cole is making his second start of the season as the Yankees are across town to take on the Mets. FanDuel loves the Yankees to get the win in Queens and has their money line -156. Head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Welcome back to the Big 6 in 60, where our local experts take a deeper dive into the day's biggest sports stories. I'm Peter Bukowski. The Edmonton Oilers got as close as you could to making the first 3-0 comeback to win the Stanley Cup in 82 years. Edmonton lost Game 7 by just a single goal, fighting to tie the game with a number of chaotic scrums in front of the Florida net in the final minutes. Connor McDavid still took home the Conn Smythe Trophy as the playoffs MVP, and the Oilers still have plenty to be proud of and hope for in the future. But Locked On Oilers host Nick Zareris can't deny this loss stings in the moment.
This game on the outset, coming in, felt pretty good. The way the previous 3 games had gone, the way the style of game was going, the rush offense was there. Florida was clunky. Florida wasn't moving the puck well. Florida wasn't cycling. They weren't forechecking well enough. And for 3 games, you saw what you needed to do to beat Florida. And then Florida clamped it down tonight. This was as textbook a game shutdown Game 7 as you can imagine. And I knew the Oilers were in trouble when I said to myself as I was watching the game, I haven't heard McDavid's name in a while, and then I haven't heard Draisaitl's name in a while. And I saw them out there on the ice, but being that the commentator hadn't said their name, They weren't on the puck, which that's not an indictment of them. That's also a commendation of Florida's ability to take away space, to take away plays. And I don't want to turn this into a witch hunt. I don't want to point fingers. I don't want to blame individuals. We'll get there. We'll have a conversation about what didn't work, what could have worked, that type of thing. But if you are an Oilers fan who is grappling with the existential dread that the greatest season in the last 18 years has come to an end prematurely without the Stanley Cup, your feelings are valid. This is about as heartbreaking a tease as it gets in all of sports. If you are a fan of a particularly tortured franchise, Cubs pre-2016, if you're a Met fan, if you're a Leafs fan, if you're a fan of a team that always finds ways to lose, it seems like just when you think you're done, you have no reason to care anymore, they pull you back in and you're like, oh, we're going to do this. We can do this. That was games 4, 5, and 6. And then tonight, it's not that the Oilers played badly. It's that they didn't capitalize on the opportunities before them. And that's why the Panthers have the cup and they don't. The Oilers didn't have a bad game tonight. Would you like some of those goals back? Yes, of course. You definitely want some of those goals back. At the same time, you're not going to win against the Panthers if you only score 1 goal. Ask the Rangers. They tried. And this is the conundrum. These two teams are in direct contrast with each other in what they want to do to be successfully. For the first 3 games, you saw Florida kind of get what they wanted. Then for the last 3 games, you saw Edmonton get what they wanted. Edmonton got the transition going. Florida couldn't cycle them because Edmonton was breaking the puck out quickly. Edmonton was getting their guys going up and down, up and down, up and down. And when you're trading chances, the scores are going to be higher. This game, complete opposite of the previous 3. And that's what was so frustrating about watching this game. I kept going back to that one sequence in game number 3 where the Oilers got close to tying that game. And the thing I kept coming back to, that was game number 2, excuse me. The Oilers had chances, but tonight, the thing about tonight's game, it felt like watching a plane crash in slow motion. Because every single time an Oiler takes a shot from the point, they take a shot from the top of the circles, it's not getting through all the traffic. It's not finding a way through. And that's something I did want to highlight. I'm pulling up the box score here so I can talk about it accurately. So I'm going to sort the box by shots on goal. 4 shots for Foegele, 2 shots for Hyman, 2 shots for Henrique, 2 shots for McDavid, 1 for Connor Brown, 1 for Janmark, 1 for Nuge, and then 5 for Bouchard, 4 for Ekholm, 1 for Ceci, 1 for Nurse. The fact that your leading shot getter in Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final was Evan Bouchard and then Matthias Ekholm with 4 and Warren Foegele with 4, that tells me there wasn't a lot of space out there. That tells me that Florida was doing a really good job of compressing around the net. They were absorbing pressure. When Edmonton was able to gain the zone with speed, Florida was dropping their defenders back. There wasn't a whole lot of room. And because of that, Edmonton had to work a lot harder for its offense. And you heard me talk about this with Armando, and congrats to Armando, the Panthers. I'm glad, even though I'm not happy the Oilers lost, I'm glad Armando gets to experience that. Everybody should get to experience their team win something once, just once. Anything more than that, you start to become greedy and entitled. But everyone should get one. So happy for Armando. I am happy for the people I know that care about the Panthers. I am not happy that the Panthers won. There is a difference. We talked a lot that when you make Edmonton cycle, when you make Edmonton go high to low on the cycle, where you get the puck out to the point, if Bouchard is taking the shot, and I know Bouchard's got a great shot. He's one of the best shooting defensemen in the league. Anytime Bouchard is on the ice and he shoots instead of McDavid or Hyman or Draisaitl, that's a win. Anytime Matthias Ekholm shoots instead of Draisaitl, Hyman, McDavid, that's a win for Florida. And it's risk assessment. It's risk tolerance. Is Bouchard a good shooter? Yes. But where is he shooting from? He's shooting from the points. He's shooting from the circles. Those are a lot less likely to result in goals. And the one other thing that drove me nuts about this game, and I know I'm entirely rambling stream of consciousness, but I just have a lot of things I want to get to. and I did want to get this. I did want to do this live as soon as the game was over. As soon as I saw poor Connor winning the Conn Smythe, he's going to stare into the void on that plane ride. It's a long plane ride. I Googled it before I came on. It's 7 hours and 55 minutes from Miami to Edmonton. That is going to be the quietest flight in the history of air travel. I cannot imagine the emotions. And we're going to talk about the emotions. We're going to talk about processing these types of losses because, I'm going to save that thought because that's a good thread to tug on. And I'm going to save that for one of the next two segments. I don't want to get into that with only a minute and a half to go. But this game, it lived up to the hype. We talked about on the show yesterday the recent history of Game 7s, a lot of 4-1s, a lot of 3-1s. St. Louis 4-1 over the Bruins 4-0 over Vancouver in 2011. It had been a while since we had a Stanley Cup final Game 7 that lived up to the hype. And the reason I know it lived up to the hype was during the national anthems, I felt that little pit in my stomach of, oh yeah, we're doing this. This is for everything. This is for what you spend your entire life to get to. And we talked a lot about the stories and the journey and why that's what makes sports so special in their ability to bring people together from all different types of places, all different types of backgrounds. And it just sucks it had to end that way for Edmonton. And I'll wrap up the segment on this note. 2015, second round Eastern Conference Finals. Barry Trotz is talking to Doc Emmerich, Pierre Maguire, Eddie Olczyk, pregame morning skate, I think. And Doc was talking with Barry Trotz, who was the Capitals coach at the time. They hadn't won the Stanley Cup yet. And he says, a series like this, it's a shame someone has to lose because both of these teams have played great. No margin for error. And this is about as nail-biting and as close as you're going to get.
Stay up to date on all things Oilers by subscribing to Locked On Oilers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The Toronto Raptors made big news in the NBA yesterday, signing all-star Scottie Barnes to a max rookie extension. The 5-year contract guarantees Barnes $225 million and could be worth up to $270 million when it's all said and done. It's also the biggest contract in Raptors history, so Toronto is putting all of its chips on Barnes, leading the future of the franchise. While most of Canada remained glued to the Stanley Cup final, Locked On Raptors host Sean Woodley broke down the deal.
Adrian Wojnarowski of ESPN signing a 5-year up to $270 million max contract with the Toronto Raptors. They like to frame it with the biggest possible number. It's most likely it's closer to 5 years, $225 million, unless, of course, he becomes eligible for the Supermax by going and making an All-NBA team, winning MVP. I think Defensive Player of the Year as well is one of the caveats, which can get you, access to that Supermax. So what we're really looking at here is a deal that's for 5 years. It's going to start around 39 million bucks in year one and round out to about 51 million in 2023, when notably a lot of stars around the NBA are going to be encroaching upon the $100 million a year mark as the cap is set to go up exponentially, or not exponentially, I guess, in definition, but 10% every year for the next who knows how many years with the new TV deal and gambling money, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Big V, initial reaction to a deal that we all knew was coming. We all knew was going to be something the Raptors just had to pony up to do. What were your initial thoughts on Scottie Barnes signing his new deal to stick around in Toronto through the end of 2030?
Good for him. Good for the franchise. He's obviously the centerpiece, the face of the franchise moving forward. And so you would like that security and knowing that he's going to be around for the next while. And that's the biggest thing to take away from it. And now I think in some ways you could say this was the easy part. And now, we get into more of the difficult stuff, right? And building around him and building in the right way and getting the pieces that fit. And so, you look at the way the franchise has, the front office, the organization as a whole has talked about him, has catered to him. Obviously, they see him as a top tier player in this league and expect him to be that superstar that you can build around. And so now the work begins. It's like, hey, okay, you know what you've got in this player. You know you have your own projection of what he's going to be in this league. And so can you build around him in the right way?
For sure. Eggs meet Scottie Barnes's basket. That's kind of the situation the Raptors are in now. And I don't think that's a bad place to be. You know, I think there's probably still, not probably, there is a lot yet to be determined when it comes to the absolute ceiling of Scottie Barnes, right? The leap he took in year 3 was ridiculous. It was all encompassing. He got better at basically everything over the course of, his impact on the game. And I don't think it's fair necessarily to expect an exact replica of the leap you just saw from year 3 to year 4. That said, we just saw him do what he did. He's won Rookie of the Year. He has flashed really tantalizing high-level talent and a dominance and an ability to assert himself upon a game. I think it's a worthwhile bet for the Raptors to say, hey, this is our guy that the whole thing is going to be centered around. Let's lock him in. And now let's get to what you just said is the hard part, is figuring out how to build team around Scottie Barnes and how to maximize it. And sort of, I think we'll get into this a little bit later on, but the calculation of when to go all in, when to be patient, I think that's a really fascinating thing here too with Scottie Barnes that, again, we'll examine a little bit later on as we examine a little bit of a fake trade that I may have done in the Locked On Raptors mock draft that could sort of indicate one possible way the Raptors could play this with Scottie Barnes. But all told, what he's shown at age 22, 28-6 with 2.8 stocks per game on pretty reasonable league average efficiency. Took the step from 3-point range, the playmaking, obviously the passing talent he has. Maybe it hasn't been totally realized playing within sort of strange contexts in a janky season last year with a constantly rotating cast of teammates. But I do think you give him a roster going in this season that is going to be the team for at least a couple of years, at least the core pieces. And I think there's plenty of runway here for Scottie Barnes to improve upon the already exciting start to his NBA career. The big question is whether or not he's going to go and earn that Supermax as well. Let me ask you, Big V, what if you just had to put a number on it, a percentage chance that Scottie Barnes goes out next year and is good enough to earn all NBA consideration? Probably not going to win an MVP, but I guess we can leave that on the table as well. Defensive Player of the Year feels like a stretch, but he did make big strides on that end last year. What would you sort of just set as the expectation, the percentage chance that he does in fact make good on the requirements to earn that Supermax going into the start of the contract in a year's time?
If I had to put a number on it, I'd probably say somewhere between 20 to 25%. I think a lot of that comes down to what I expect the team success to be next season.
Totally.
And I think especially if you're going to break through to make your first all NBA team, I think the team success has to be there to a significant degree. And I think, I think Tyrese Halliburton is a good example, right? The way Indiana kind of captured the imagination of people with whether it was the in-season tournament run and the way their style of play and all of that. It was just impossible to ignore, right? And so I think to have that type of season, the Raptors are going to have, a lot more success than they did last season. And I think that's the tough part for me to project. And then I think the thing that maybe improves his odds as well is just like the uncertainty that we now have with the 65 game rule, right?
Sure.
Where you might have guys who, based on the numbers, would be deserving, Joel Embiid, right? But all of a sudden they don't meet that 65 game threshold, and that opens the door for someone else to get in, right? And so you look at the guys who made all NBA this season, specifically if you look at the forwards, you look at Giannis, you look at Tatum, KD, Ant, Kawhi, LeBron, those aren't names that you're expecting Scottie to beat out, right? But especially with the 65 game rule, I think it makes things more interesting.
Yeah, I'm with you there for sure. I think there's a world in which the Raptors are one of the surprise darling teams of the league. It's not maybe the most likely outcome, but it's certainly there if Scottie Barnes takes the kind of jump that the Raptors seem to think he's capable of. If Emmanuel quickly continues to settle into the lead guard role and gets more comfortable there and takes a jump himself, there's an avenue here for this team to be better than maybe the preseason win total projections might suggest. And if that happens, that is an avenue to getting yourself on an all-NBA team. People love the surprise darling team. And if you're the best player on a surprise darling team, that's going to put you in the all-NBA conversation. And look, he was an all-star last year, an injury replacement, sure, but that already puts him in the top 30, 35 of the league, just as a starting point going into this year. Obviously, you got to get yourself to the top 15 or 20, depending on obviously injuries and eligibilities and all that, to have a real shot at sniffing all-NBA. And it's a hard thing to do, but we've seen it before. We've seen it with Raptors guys before on, good teams, sort of okay teams, pretty decent teams. Like, it doesn't take 55 wins to make yourself all-NBA worthy. If the Raptors go out next year, win 45 games with Scottie Barnes being the biggest reason why, there's a very real chance that becomes a Supermax deal, which, by the way, would still be fine in the grand scheme of things.
Stay up to date on all things Raptors by subscribing to Locked On Raptors, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Coming up, more offseason moves in the NBA. The Cavs have a new head coach. Can he be the one to help a young Cleveland team take the next step toward a title? That's next on the Big Six in 60. Game Time makes getting to the ballpark even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, and their best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. They're obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on tickets. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event, and even an hour after it starts. It's the place to find last-minute seats. Find exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. And the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the free app and new users can get $20 off their first purchase with code Locked On. Terms applied. That's code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase with Game Time. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, the lowest price, guaranteed. This is the Big Six in 60, a closer look at the six biggest stories in sports. I'm Peter Bukowski. The Cleveland Cavaliers hired former Warriors assistant and Nets head coach Kenny Atkinson as their newest head coach on Monday. He will replace JB Bickerstaff, who started a rebuild that got Cleveland to the second round of the playoffs last season. With a young team full of potential and now a taste of success, what are the expectations for Atkinson? Locked On Cavs host Danny Cunningham gives us that answer.
The things that I expect from this hire for the Cavaliers and out of Kenny Atkinson, I've got a list of them that I want to go through here. But the thing that I think we are going to see change, and it's going to be the most noticeable change that we see, is how the offense works. Now, the Nets weren't exactly a top of the NBA offense when Atkinson was there. I don't think that is a Kenny Atkinson thing. I think part of that was what the personnel was like in Brooklyn. Because if you look at those Nets teams, I think that Kenny got pretty close to the most out of those groups. That those groups were right around their ceiling while he was the coach. They just weren't very talented. Like, there were some nice players. D'Angelo Russell made an all-star team. Karis LeVert, when he was healthy, was a good player. Jarrett Allen, of course, who we know very well, started to develop there, but he was a younger guy and certainly was not what he has turned into here in Cleveland. He was a nice player, but not the all-star caliber big guy that we think of as a member of the Cavs. But the thing that the Nets did pretty consistently under Atkinson, and I don't know how married he is to playing this way. This will certainly be something that I'm very interested in asking him when he's introduced to the media, whenever that is. But the Nets were a team that was consistently in the top 10 in the NBA in pace. They were a team that, they weren't the 7 seconds or less Suns, but they played pretty quick. And part of that can be at times when a team isn't as talented as other teams, that is something that can be used in the NBA as a little bit of a gimmick to juice up numbers, to make the team more competitive. If maybe they're not all that great offensively, they're going to look for some of that low-hanging fruit by just getting out in transition. And some nights, you can just beat the opponent down the floor. You can just win that race. And that is how you can find a way. When you're winning 28 games in the season, as the Nets were, or 20 games in the season as they were even, you have to find ways, and that might be one of the ways. Or considering that when the Nets got good, that was still part of their DNA. They were still a top third of the league team in pace. That could be part of Atkinson's DNA as a coach. Now, the Cavs, I think right now have some roster issues that might prevent them from playing quite that fast. But if you look at Atkinson's 4 years, they were a top 10 team in pace in 3 of those 4 years. The 4th year, they were 11th. So it's not like they just had a random outlier year where they were 20th in pace. They were top 11 in the NBA in pace in each of the 4 seasons that Atkinson was the head coach there. That is something that I'm very much interested in seeing the Cavs do next year. I don't know how possible it is. By playing 2 big guys as often as the Cavs do, it can be difficult for those guys to get up and down the floor and to win the race against the opponent trying to play faster. That can be a challenge. That's not the entire reason why, but that's part of the reason why the Cavs have been one of the slower paced teams in basketball over the last several years, because when you're big, it's hard to move up and down the floor. It's hard to play super quick. Part of it I do think was how JB Bickerstaff wanted to play, the philosophy that he had, but that is something that I think is very much worth noting as we dive into what we should expect out of a Kenny Atkinson-led basketball team. The other thing that stands out to me is what D'Angelo Russell did in his 2017 season, where Russell was an all-star. He averaged just over 21 points a game, shot just under 37% from 3. And I think D'Angelo Russell's a fine basketball player, but I think that is the best he's ever been. And I think Kenny Atkinson deserves some credit for getting that out of him. And the way that I translate that to the Cavs is that if he got that out of a young D'Angelo Russell, who, to be fair, isn't the D'Angelo Russell of right now. I think that player has changed in a number of different ways, some good, some bad. I think Darius Garland is better than that version of D'Angelo Russell. Now, that being said, I'm not 100% certain Darius Garland is going to be on this basketball team when the season opens up in October. That is something that I think is subject to change. I do. But if he is here, I think Atkinson is a pretty good option as a coach to help revitalize Garland's career after what was just a nightmare of a season this past year with the fractured jaw and just everything that Garland went through. He needs a bounce back season. I think Kenny Atkinson can be someone that really does help to get him back on the right track and get him back playing at an all-star level. I also do think that Atkinson's a pretty good option to get the 2 guard lineup to work. I've got questions about the 2 big lineup. I think that is interesting. I will talk about that coming up in a second. But I do think that Atkinson, if there's a coach that can find a way to make all this stuff work, I do have a lot of faith in Kenny Atkinson being that guy. I do. The other thing that I think gets overlooked a little bit with Brooklyn when he was the coach is they weren't a bad defensive team. They weren't what the Cavs are. They weren't a suffocating team that could defend the rim and defend the 3-point line and just do everything that the Cavs have done so well. But they were a pretty average defensive team with a roster that wasn't filled with great defenders. Jarrett Allen was a good defender then. I think he's a better defender now, and I don't think you're going to find a lot of people that disagree with me there. He was someone that was a really good rim defender, would get dunked on a lot. The same way now he'll get dunked on because he's going to try and protect that rim, and that's a side effect of being a really good rim defender, sometimes getting dunked on. But I think that this Cavs team is better suited to be a good defensive team. So I actually have a little bit more faith in who Kenny Atkinson is as a defensive coach, as someone who can control a defense, than I did, I don't know, a week or so ago as I've looked more into this. That's something that I think I feel better about with the Cavs, with this hire. That's something I feel just a little bit better about. The other thing that stood out to me as I went back and looked at some of the underlying numbers for the Nets under Atkinson, his teams were always teams that were more than willing to take a ton of 3-pointers. The 4 years that Atkinson was the head coach of the Brooklyn Nets, Brooklyn ranked 4th, 2nd, 5th, and 5th in 3-point attempts. That is an area where the Cavs absolutely can improve. I think that getting Darius Garland to shoot more three-pointers is a big key for getting the most out of him. I think this roster is also suited to have that type of output to where they can be a top of the league type team in three-point attempts. I don't know how many Evan Mobley's going to take. We know Donovan Mitchell's going to take a lot. I think more playing time is in the future of Sam Merrill. Max Strus certainly is someone that's going to fire away. If Isaac Okoro is on this basketball team, and as of now, I expect him to be, as he's a restricted free agent, getting him to up his volume a little bit more. I think that the ingredients for this Cavs team to be a top 5 team in three-point attempts next season, absolutely ingredients that they have in their cupboard right now. I think that that is something that is very attainable. And of course, you have to make those shots. If you're taking 43, 44, 45 three-pointers a game, but they're not good shots, what good does it do you? Not very much. But I think that they will be able to get good three-point looks considering who is creating for them. And I think that is part of the puzzle. But one of the things that is the biggest priority for Kenny Atkinson is developing Evan Mobley. That needs to be on the courts, one of the biggest priorities that the Cavs have and that Atkinson has. This team has its floor raised by Donovan Mitchell, but at the end of this era, we will judge how successful this era of Cavaliers basketball is by how good Evan Mobley becomes. Donovan Mitchell is going to continue to be great. I don't think there's much room for debate there. But if Evan Mobley becomes great, I think that the Cavs go from a really good team to a team that can be a championship contender. If Evan Mobley stays what he is, they're going to be a really good team. But I don't see how they're going to compete for championships. They need Evan Mobley to take a big step forward. Kenny Atkinson getting that out of him is arguably the most important thing and going to be the most telling thing as far as his tenure as head coach of the Cavaliers goes. This question that we've answered now, as far as who the head coach of the Cavs is just the first question of the offseason to be answered. Next up, we know Donovan Mitchell, contract extension, that's on the table. We're waiting to find out about that. That's a very big question. I think that's the one that gets answered next. I would expect we're going to hear a little bit more about that in the coming days. I think if you're reading between the lines too, the way a lot of the stuff is being reported, you should feel pretty good about Donovan signing that contract extension and staying in Cleveland. I think you should feel pretty good about that. I do. The other questions we have still, the core four going to stay together? If not, who's going to be traded? Are you going to trade just one of them? Are you going to trade Darius Garland and Jarrett Allen? Because if there are two people that get moved out of that group, I think it's those two. What's the rest of this offseason look like? There's still so much to find out. But question number 1 was answered on Monday. Is Kenny Atkinson the new head coach of the Cleveland Cavaliers?
Stay up to date on all things Cavaliers by subscribing to Locked On Cavs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The Minnesota Timberwolves went to the Western Conference Finals this year, and on Monday, they paid the coach who brought them there. That's next on the Big Six in 60. I love sports. I love them so much, I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games. And the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up a bet anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. Garrett Cole is making his second start of the season as the Yankees are across town to take on the Mets. FanDuel loves the Yankees to get the win in Queens and has their money line -156. Head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Welcome back to the Big Six in 60. I'm Peter Bukowski. The Timberwolves won their first playoff series in 20 years last season and then took down the defending champion Nuggets to make the Western Finals. Minnesota secured the foundation of that success Monday by signing coach Chris Finch to a 4-year extension through the 2027-2028 season. And Locked On Wolves host Ben Beacon gives us all the info on the deal and looks ahead to what's next for Finch and Minnesota.
This was announced, first reported by Adrian Wojnarowski of ESPN late afternoon on Monday. And it was shortly thereafter confirmed by the team. The Timberwolves announced that they had signed Chris Finch to a contract extension. We know it's a 4-year extension that goes through the 27-28 season. And there's no terms announced. The team doesn't announce terms. There's no terms announced in terms of, or reported, I should say, from Woj about how much he's making. There's been a lot of coaches have gotten raises lately, and no doubt Chris Finch did too. It's interesting, although perhaps not surprising, this still got done in the midst of the ownership dispute. The arbitration that's coming up here later this summer at some point in July or August is when that'll take place. But Chris Finch doesn't care. He gets his contract. He was going to sign an extension probably no matter what. Of course, Tim Connolly added a year to his deal, or I should say delayed the option a year. So Tim Connolly could opt out of his contract next summer. Reading between the lines here, that seems more likely than not if Glenn Taylor is still in charge a year from now. But Chris Finch, either way, is now under contract for 4 more seasons. He's been the Wolves coach now for 3+ years, and of course taking over midway through the 2021 season, 2020-2021 season for Ryan Saunders. And then the next 3 years, the Wolves were a playoff team. They were the 6th seed, then they were the 8th seed after losing and winning in the play-in, and then this year, of course, the 3rd seed in the West, and made it all the way to the conference finals. So much deserved for Chris Finch. I've long been a Chris Finch. It feels weird to say defender, because we're talking about a guy who, was second in coach of the year voting this year and went to the conference finals. Only the second Wolves coach to ever do that. But there's been a lot of, go back to November, there was plenty of Chris Finch slander. Go back to January, for whatever reason, there was still plenty of Chris Finch slander. Yes, the Wolves offense has been disappointing for much of his tenure when that was supposed to be his thing. But taking a 2-big lineup that hardly anybody thought would work and giving the Wolves, I shouldn't say giving the Wolves, helping the Wolves develop the league's best defense this year, and also improving the offense. It wasn't very good 2 years ago or the year before this one. It was much better this year. Even if collectively it finished only a few slots better league-wide, the highs for this year's offense were much better than the year prior. And clearly this team continues to make progress. But it's so much of it is about Chris Finch's demeanor, the way he handles himself, the way the players respect him, his direct. He's at the same time laid back, but yet direct with the players. It's not direct in a Tom Thibodeau yelling, screaming way. It's direct in a different way, a more respectful man-to-man, like, hey, I respect you as a player. You respect me as the coach. I'm going to give it to you straight. I'm going to have the difficult conversation, but I'm overall going to have a more laid back demeanor. And that's Chris Finch, and players love it. Anthony Edwards obviously is vocal about loving Finchy, and all the players seem to really enjoy playing for him. So congratulations to Chris Finch, obviously well-deserved, and he'll now be the Wolves coach for the next 4 years.
Stay up to date on all things Timberwolves by subscribing to Locked On Wolves, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Coming up, the Tennessee Volunteers won their first NCAA baseball championship last night. Reaction from the winning side up next on the Big 6 in 60. Game Time makes getting to the ballpark even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, and their best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. They're obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on tickets. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event, and even an hour after it starts. It's the place to find last-minute seats. Find exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. And the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the free app, and new users can get $20 off their first purchase with code Locked On. Terms applied. That's code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase with Game Time. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, the lowest price, guaranteed. Welcome back to the Big 6 in 60. I'm Peter Bukowski. We wrap things up today in Omaha. It's not too often you get a pair of winner-take-all games for championships on the same night. While the Panthers and Oilers fought for the Cup, Tennessee and Texas A&M played a deciding Game 3 in Omaha for the College World Series title. The top-seeded Volunteers came out on top, fighting off a late comeback to beat the Aggies by just a single run and taking home the school's first NCAA championship in baseball. After a thrilling final game, Locked On Vols celebrate and break down the win.
The national champion Tennessee Volunteers, first baseball national championship in program history, the first Tennessee team national championship since the 09 women's track and field team. The first national championship game that was played since the 08 Lady Vols. 24th team national championship, first in baseball history for the Tennessee Volunteers, avenging the 1951 Volunteers that fell to Oklahoma 3-2. Tennessee becomes the first SEC team to win 60 games in a season, in a single season. We can do a story, we can do a show about all the records this team broke, but at the end of the day, none of that matters if you don't win the ship. And Tennessee won the ship this year. Tennessee is national champion, so awesome stuff. Tennessee had control of this game from the get-go, and sure, it got a little risque there as the game went on, and it got pretty flat-out nerve-wracking as time went on, but Tennessee never trailed in this game. Tennessee took a 1-0 lead from Christian Moore's leadoff solo home run in the bottom of the first inning, and Tennessee led 1-0. Then you had a sacrifice fly in the second inning. You had an RBI single in the second inning. I believe that one of those was from Dean Curley. I think the sac fly was from Dylan Dreiling, and Tennessee led 3-1 after A&M tied it briefly, just ever so briefly, on an unearned run in the top of the third inning. Tennessee comes back, puts 2 on in the bottom of the third, and Tennessee's leading 3-1. Tennessee comes in and scores 3 runs in the bottom of the seventh inning, 2 runs coming off a 2-run home run from Dylan Dreiling. And, I mean, that was huge, obviously. And the Cavaliers, the RBI double, and that scored Hunter Inslee, and that was just a huge run, as we've been talking about. I mean, that was the last run scored, and that was most important because Tennessee led by 1 run at the end of the game at 6-5. And then you go in there, and you've got Nate Snead laboring. He threw 34 pitches. He threw in 5 games. 5 of the 6 games here in the College World Series, Nate Snead threw in, which is just mind-blowing to me. And you turn it over to Dylan Loy, and Dylan Loy did not do well, but Dylan Loy is going to be a stud, I can tell you that. I think Dylan Loy is going to be a really, really good pitcher for this team moving forward in the future, the Pitch and Forge native. But he lasts only a third of an inning. He walks, he gives up 2 hits and allows a run. You go over and give it to Kirby Cannell. He's able to get you 2 outs, which is big, 2 strikeouts, which is huge. And then you hand the ball over to Aaron Combs. Say, Aaron Combs, you got a 3-run lead. Go win us a ball game. Go win us a natty. And the guy leads off with a double. It's like, okay, well, that run doesn't matter. That run doesn't matter at all. A couple of wild pitches, and he comes around, scores, and that's okay. And that run doesn't matter, and all that. I mean, you got the tying run at the plate as the game is coming to an end, and he gets 3 strikeouts, and as a pitcher, ending the College World Series, winning the College World Series via strikeout, 3 of them in the bottom of the 9th inning, top of the 9th inning. I mean, what better feeling can you have than that? Man, Aaron Combs is just so big for this Tennessee team each of the past 2 games. This is coming off throwing 60 pitches in yesterday's win over Texas A&M as well. So I thought that was huge. And then, of course, Xander Sechrest. I mean, gosh, what more can we say about him? I mean, look at these numbers. Today he goes, apologies, my mouse went to sleep. Today Xander Sechrest goes 5 innings and a third. He allows 1 run. It was not earned. Oh, this is wrong here. This says that it was earned. It's not earned. 6 hits, 5 innings and a third, 7 strikeouts, 1 walk on 88 pitches. I mean, Xander Sechrest is just, I mean, what more can you say about this guy? Over his final 6 starts, that included winning the regular season, putting Tennessee in the SEC tournament championship game, moving Tennessee onto supers, moving Tennessee onto the College World Series, putting Tennessee in the College World Series finals, and then finally starting the game that wins it all for the University of Tennessee. Xander Sechrest over his last 6 starts has been phenomenal. A combined 34 innings and 2/3, 9 runs, 4 of them earned, 29 hits, 28 strikeouts, and 4 NCAA postseason starts, including 2 in Omaha. The Southpaws combined to toss 22 innings and 2/3, 7 runs, 2 earned, 21 hits, and 19 strikeouts. I mean, Xander Sechrest is not even on this planet right now. It's incredible. So just one of the best storylines of this team. Hunter Inslee is such a great storyline. Xander Sechrest is such a great storyline. Christian Moore, arguably the best player on the planet, such a great storyline. Dylan Dreiling, who was MVP, such a storyline. Blake Burke, his bounce back year, phenomenal. I mean, we can go on and on and on. and on. Drew Beam, AJ Causey, Nate Snead, Kirby Cannell. That's what national championships teams produce. All these storylines. And people like me that got to write these up over the next couple of weeks because your boy's going to be it's going to be hella late before I get back to the hotel tonight, and I'm going to be traveling all day tomorrow. But nonetheless, just what an effort. What an effort. I'm super duper blessed. Super duper blessed to be able to do this. As you can see, I never have a script. I don't want to act like I do, but I'm just kind of freelancing this thing right now. I'm just kind of spitting. Everything I got right here because it's immediately after this game. Oh, Tennessee wins 6-5. Tennessee wins 6-5. Thought Tennessee did a really good job of getting to the starter, Justin Lampkin. This is his third start here in Omaha, and Tennessee made him pay. 60 pitches through 2 2/3. He allowed 3 runs. Evan Aschenbach, who's their closer, who has 10 saves on the year coming into the College World Series, or coming into the finals round, I should say. Really, really good pitcher. Tennessee got to him as well. 3 innings, 3 runs off 6 hits. He had to pitch 46 pitches after throwing 54 pitches in the first game back on Saturday. Tennessee just found a way. So at the end of the day, Tennessee is the last team standing. Tennessee is victorious. Tony Vitello has his national championship. Really, really happy for him. Really, really happy that people got to see him and his teams on this stage. And if so many people just want to hate on Tennessee because they put on a fur coat and a daddy hat and they hit a lot of home runs and they bat flip and they have a lot of fun like they did in 2022, but don't know the work and don't know the determination and the relentless effort and all that type of stuff on an everyday basis that Tony Vitello brings. It's really kind of cool being in these national press conference settings or locally for a regional or something, or even in Hoover for the SEC tournament. It's like you see people that don't want to like him, and they kind of walk away saying, "Oh man, he dropped that movie reference. That's funny, man. He's a real personable guy." Well, of course he is. He loves sports. He loves movies. He loves pop culture. He loves baseball, and he's champion. I don't know. I'm running out of things to say, guys. Tennessee's national champion. I mean, did you ever think that Tennessee would win another national championship? I mean, I don't remember much. I mean, I remember Lady Vols winning it a lot. When I was younger, I don't remember 98. There's people younger than me that try to say, "Oh, I remember when Tennessee won in 98." I'm like, no, you don't. I don't remember that. No, there's no way you remember that. I'll never forget this one. That's for damn sure. I'll never forget this one. I'm here in person. I spent 12 days in Omaha. I covered it. I enjoyed myself, and the team I covered won a national championship. So this is really, really cool. Really, really cool. Congratulations to you, Tennessee fans. Congratulations to you, Tennessee baseball fans that howl me about putting more baseball in this podcast, who've been watching since Serrano and Delmonico even, and congrats to you guys. Congrats to Tennessee fans in general. They say all sports school. Well, you got a daggum natty now, okay? There's some validity to that, for sure. And oh yeah, batter ball syndrome. Texas finally fires their head coach. On the day of the national championship. I think it's hilarious. I think that guy, Jim Schlossnagle in the Texas A&M dugouts, the prime candidate there, and we'll see if it gets done. But Tennessee, people have been asking me all day long, "Are you sure Tony Vitello will have anything to worry about? Are you sure?" Tony Vitello ain't going nowhere. 100%. I mean, I don't want to. Again, I shouldn't say 100%. I will never say never. But Tony Vitello ain't going nowhere. Tony Vitello is not going anywhere. So I can tell you that with the utmost confidence. And he's about to get paid, and his assistants are about to get paid, and they're going to try to do it all over again next year. Transfer portal, MLB draft, all that and more. There's so much more. I mean, it literally never stops. But Tennessee baseball are the last team standing on the final game of the season, the very last day. Tennessee baseball reigns supreme.
Stay up to date on all things Tennessee by subscribing to Locked On Vols, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks again to all of our hosts for their expert analysis on the biggest stories of the day. Follow your favorite team's podcast wherever you listen and on YouTube for new episodes every weekday. Tune in again tomorrow for a new hour on the 6 biggest stories in sports. This has been the Big 6 in 60, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.